The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories. With the news at this time, I am Tiana Jordan. A very good morning to you. To begin the news, here's a look at the lead stories. The Alliance for Change is accusing the governing People's Progressive Party administration of stalling the Public Accounts Committee process of shortlisting names for the Public Procurement Commission. One parliamentary political party is calling for the restart of amending election laws and to include the Law Reform Commission and other experts. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister Stuart Young is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector in the two countries. And in regional news, faith-based groups are challenging the government of Barbados over attempts to tamper with references to God in the coming Charter of Barbados. The details of these and other stories will be coming up right here in just a moment.
Don't let the fear of contracting the coronavirus disease deter you from seeking the medical care you need. At Eureka Labs, we ensure the safety of our clients and staff with our rigid sanitization routine. This involves the use of ultraviolet lights to effectively rid the air and all surfaces of viruses and bacteria that may be present throughout the lab daily. The light works to rapidly inactivate microorganisms through a physical process that is invisible to human eye. So the next time you need a checkup, don't hesitate to give us a call on 225-7574 to schedule your appointment.
And now the news in detail. The Alliance for Change says that the governing People's Progressive Party, PPP, is dragging its feet on the process for the appointment of members of the Public Procurement Commission, PCC. Opposition member of the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, and former chairman of the PAC, David Patterson, says the PAC has begun the process to have the members approved first by the PAC, but is suffering setback by the government. The PAC is now to shortlist 5 names from a list of 30 applicants for whom background checks were completed.
Names came back, and since the recess, the opposition has been trying to meet with the lead person, which is Madam Gail Teixeira, up for the subcommittee to further discuss this program, this matter. Unfortunately, to date, we were unable to. She is unable to facilitate the meeting.
During a PAC meeting on Monday, November 22nd, Governance Minister Gail Teixeira committed to seeing the process moving forward. Mr. Patterson says he is unimpressed and not hopeful.
Yesterday, it came up again in PSC, and we were promised that sometime this week we can restart the process of examining the names so that we could further shortlist them. I am not hopeful because the PPP doesn't, as you can see based on what's going on now, they don't see this as a priority. They actually returning to the pre-2015 position, which they claim that the Public Procurement Commission was unconstitutional and it takes away the power from cabinet to make decisions. That's their exact words, and the former President Ramachar's exact words to the Alliance for Change. So we will keep pressing, but that is the current status.
A civil society group has threatened to take legal action for the president's breach of constitutional provisions that provides for the appointment of several commissions and bodies. President Ali, since taking office more than a year ago, has not appointed any except the Local Government Commission. The Alliance for Change, AFC, calls on the government to begin a fresh process to amend election laws and involve the Constitutional Law Reform Commission, LRC, and other competent bodies.
The AFC does not see these amendments as a genuine, honest response to the problems which exist and which ought to be cured. It sees these amendments as a platform for PPP to take off in a full course of gerrymandering of District 4 to its advantage. It urges the restart of the process with all participants and stakeholders playing their roles and having their say from a drafting stage to completion stage with the help of experts who should be hired by the Law Reform Commission or can be from international and regional centers.
Leader of the AFC, Kemraj Ramjatan, at a media conference, said the Law Reform Commission is the commission to supervise and advise on law changes. Mr. Ramjatan says the government is making the LRC a toothless poodle.
So you're going to take away its core functions and you're going to give somebody, if the Attorney General has the capacity to come up with these amendments, what is wrong with people who was a Justice of Appeal in our Court of Appeal for 10 long years, the President of the Bar Association, a whole set of other lawyers. And by the way, under the statute that constituted the Law Reform Commission, they have a capacity to hire experts from overseas to help them in matters, electoral matters, constitutional matters, environmental, in every sector. That is what their functions are. I am saying that if you now hail this thing and bring it forward as the body that will advise government or even opposition as to what the laws are, even judges, if judges have a recommendation for a law change, the Law Reform Commission is that body that will go and do the research behind the law, the defect of the law, and what can cure it.
The AFC leader says the party studied the amendments and found them to be unacceptable and biasly recommended.
The AFC, having deliberated on the PPP's recommended changes to the Representation of the People Act, has become even more non-supportive and suspicious of the purport and content of the amendments. The party maintains that the unilateral and stealthy nature of these amendments reveal, like other developments since its installation into office, a further removal by the PPP government from meaningful consultation and participation on serious matters such as electoral reform. This biased, subjectivist process has poisoned these amendments beyond acceptance.
The AFC leader says the draft amendments are not geared to cure, but to drive fear and reluctance of persons to seek those offices, which opens the door for party loyalists to be employed. Mr. Kemraj Ramjatan believes that the draconian penalties are there to be applied in a biased manner to whom the government targets. Former Director of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Dr. Vincent Adams, and member of the Alliance for Change, calls on the government to not approve the Yellowtail project until ExxonMobil agrees to audit its $9.5 billion bill submitted to Guyana. Dr. Vincent Adams, who was fired by the present administration as director of the EPA, wants the government to ensure that ExxonMobil expenses submitted to Guyana for reimbursements be audited. Dr. Adams calls for the withholding of approval of one project Exxon is seeking to develop to get the audit.
The AFC is calling upon the government to not approve the Yellowtail project until Exxon agrees to this audit. A similar demand of the EPA under the coalition proved to be successful in obtaining unlimited liability assurance coverage from the parent companies of EPGL as a condition for approving the Liza 2 project. But unfortunately, true to form, the PPP civic government promptly reversed that decision.
Former Public Infrastructure Minister under the APNU plus AFC coalition, David Patterson, says it is important for Guyana to know what is included in Exxon's $9.5 billion bill to Guyana.
Included in this $9 billion are other such costs as the cost of Exxon's new headquarters being constructed in Ogle, Every time Exxon charters a private plane to travel from the USA to Guyana, this cost is cost reimbursable. Every function that Exxon hosts, every bottle of wild wine drank by the invitees at these functions can be listed as cost recoverable. Every social media ad claiming that the company is a good corporate citizen is cost recoverable. Included in this $9 billion will be the salaries for persons in Houston and other parts of the world who the company may claim are working on Guyana's projects. In fact, every single item, despite how remote, with even the merest or no connection to Guyana, can be included in these costs.
Mr. David Patterson reminded that while in opposition, the PPP called for an audit of Exxon pre-contract cost of $460 million. He says that audit was completed more than a year ago and questioned why the result of that audit is not released to the public. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister, Stuart Young, is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector. He was addressing the first policy forum organized by the Energy Chamber of Trinidad and Tobago.
The same Surinamese delegation that you met with last week, we also met with, and I gave them a commitment that there is a complete open door policy. In fact, I told them it would be to their benefit. There would be a lot of carpetbaggers, as I call them, rushing to Suriname and to Guyana, selling them what they consider the best advice in the world and trying to lead them down garden paths. They can learn from Trinidad and Tobago, and we are willing at the government level to facilitate that, to share our experiences, to share our ideas.
At the same time, the Trinidad and Tobago Energy Minister is urging the Energy Chamber in his country, which is well positioned, to take advantage of opportunities in sister Caribbean community CARICOM member states.
Regional integration is something some of us strive for and hope for, but we must be realistic as well of the difficulties that we, Trinidad and Tobago, may have in entering other regional jurisdictions. Again, I give the commitment that the government is willing to work with the membership of the Energy Chamber to listen and for us to formulate a strategy to ensure that our personnel, our services, and our assets and what it is we can offer as Trinidad and Tobago to our regional brothers and sisters can be made available.
Prior to returning to office last August, the People's Progressive Party had been very critical about the numerous Trinidad and Tobago companies that had been coming to Guyana to work in the oil sector. The Irfan Ali-led administration has since said that certain areas such as catering, lawn mowing, laundry, and trucking are services that are reserved for Guyanese. The Caribbean Examinations Council, CXC, announced that preparations have started to put a new examination in place. Addressing the opening of a CXC ministerial summit, the Registrar and Chief Executive Officer of that regional examination body, Dr. Wayne Wesley, says the aim is to reduce the number of secondary school students leaving without certification. Dr. Wesley says its Research, Insights and Production Innovation Department has started discussing a new design of the framework for the award of certification. Among the plans, he says, is the introduction of a new certificate named the Caribbean Technical Education Certificate, or CTEC.
CTEC will be a broad-based qualification geared towards character development, technical and applied competencies for employment, entrepreneurship, and good citizenry. In other words, a sense of regional pride. The CTEC would represent the minimum competencies for an individual to perform in society while providing opportunities for students to continue to pursue the CSEC and CAPE at an appropriate time of readiness.
The CXC registrar says CTEC's aim is to give opportunities to as many secondary school leavers as possible through regional certification.
This, we believe, will create alternative pathways for all candidates as we seek to promote equity with all qualifications issued by CXC, ensuring that value and parity of esteem are placed on all qualifications.
CXC's Registrar and Chief Executive Officer, Dr. Wayne Wesley. Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Dr. Ralph Gonzalez, has called on the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, to make history a compulsory subject in schools in CARICOM. Dr. Ralph Gonzalez was at the time delivering keynote remarks at the Regional Examination Body's inaugural Education Ministerial Summit under the theme Facilitating Transformation Through Assessment. Dr. Gonzalez says understanding and appreciating the birth of regional institutions will come through knowing how the key institutions were formed.
Before 1972, this CXC didn't exist. We need to understand how it came about and its journey to where we are today. That has to be done through a historical analysis. These are things which have taken place in our Caribbean civilization. And the way in which we can grasp these things is to understand our history. I want to begin by making the point very strongly that I've been on record of supporting the making of history to be compulsory in secondary schools.
The St. Vincent Prime Minister says history seems to belong to lesser mortals since most feel that science subjects are more for the brilliant students. PM Gonzalez told the summit that history is key for CARICOM.
When I speak to the question of history and look at the way it connects with our regional integration movement and development, sustainable development, we would see the necessity and desirability for having the subject compulsory on our syllabus for the secondary schools. I wouldn't be surprised if you take a poll across the Caribbean among teachers and students, and you were to pose the question as to name recognition and importance to our region, and you ask them who it is, whether it's Walter Rodney or Walter Raleigh, more than likely Walter Raleigh is going to win out. It is an indictment of our own education system and perhaps of CXC itself. And that is why this is so critical that this discussion has arisen.
Dr. Gonzalez urged that teaching contemporary history in schools address areas of the molding of the Caribbean and its international relations with global groups. He says, our understanding of ourselves as a region will come from learning that history.
To understand all of these things and the role they have played in our Caribbean civilization and in our development and certainly in our integration movement, we can't grasp them unless we have a study of our history, of the social movements, of the economic structures, of the institutions, of the links between the metropole and the hinterland, between modern capitalism and the globalized world, and the nexus between those things and the external trade arrangements between ourselves and Europe and North America.
The summit saw presentations from 12 speakers to address various aspects of transforming the regional education body to deliver education to enhance the educational capacity and needs of the region. The health minister says to expect more cases and possible COVID deaths from low vaccinated regions despite a decline in cases overall. Dr. Frank Anthony says there are hotspots in Region 4 East Coast, East Bank, and Georgetown, Region 3 and Region 6. He, however, pointed to regions with a low vaccination rate that could possibly pose a challenge.
In the areas where we have a lot of people still remain unvaccinated, unfortunately, we are going to have more cases. And some of those cases are going to be severe and would require hospitalization. So the regions right now with the lowest vaccination rates would be Region 10, Region 8, and Region 2. And we would therefore expect that at some point, when we get cases from these regions, we will probably see some of the more severe cases coming out that require hospitalization. And if people remain unvaccinated, some of them would die.
Dr. Anthony has reported lower active cases and hospitalization.
We have 1,836 active cases, and over the last 24 hours, we got about 95 new cases. Of the 1,836 cases, we now have 58 persons in hospital, with 33 of those persons at the Ocean View Hospital, and 9 of them is in the ICU.
2 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours, taking the death toll to 979. The ministry says 396,840 adults and 28,769 children are partially vaccinated, while 271,206 adults and 19,946 children are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. And now in regional news. The government of Antigua is undecided as to what will happen to some 100 substitute teachers employed to support education delivery during the COVID surge. The Antigua Observer reports that unvaccinated teachers will return to work on December 1st. During last week's post-cabinet press briefing, Information Minister Melford Nicholas said it would be up to the Ministry of Education to determine whether the substitute teachers will permanently fill positions that were vacant before the mandate or to keep them for just their intended 3-month stint. The Director of Education, Claire Brown, says although it is premature to say, an assessment will be made to determine how many of the substitutes could be made permanent. Although Brown could not give definitive answers, he says that plans are in the pipeline for the ministry to implement a proper substitute teachers program. The government is requiring unvaccinated teachers returning to work next week to provide a negative antigen test and then submit to COVID-19 testing every 2 weeks. Tests will be provided to public sector workers free of charge. United National Congress opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisesar has again questioned how the principal medical officer of health, Dr. Miriam Abdul Richards, can be politically independent in handling health care when she's earning taxpayers' dollars while serving on 3 other state boards. According to the TNT Guardian News, opposition leader Kamla Prasad Bisesar insists that according to public service rules, Dr. Miriam Abdul Richards is bound to be non-political, which is impossible with her serving on 3 other state boards. The opposition leader told a UNC meeting that Dr. Miriam Abdul Richards is a tool of the government and a favored one. Prasad Bisesar queried the continuing rising COVID cases, saying the institution is worsening and there is need to know why so many deaths are recorded. UNC's Rudy Indar Singh called on Abdul Richards to say if her positions on several boards, including one concerning production and sale of alcohol, and Angostura Holdings Limited put her in conflict with her health role in violation of Civil Service Regulation 137. During the Ministry of Health press briefing, however, Health Minister Terence Dale Singh said he had consulted with the Permanent Secretary after the matter was raised over the weekend and was advised that Abdul Richards was not in breach of the public service regulations, which do not debar a public servant from having such positions on a private company board. Faith-based groups are challenging the government over attempts to tamper with references to God in the coming Charter of Barbados. Nation News Barbados has reported that as an umbrella body of Family Faith Freedom Barbados, the group issued a full-page statement in the Daily Nation on page 14. This is in addition to a number of prominent individuals who spoke at a press conference entitled Why We Need God Under a Barbados Republic. Chairman of the group, Pastor Paul Leacock, questioned the government's rush to a republic and the tinkering with God as the supreme being. Pastor Leacock says the government introduced a whole peripheral with things which they had to walk back on constantly, the latest being safe zones. He added that over and over in the Mia Mottley administration, there's the constant walking back of legislation, policies, and directives. And now for the international news, the latest coming from the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. A rocket has lifted off from California at the start of a mission to deliberately smash a spacecraft into an asteroid. NASA's DART project will test whether it's possible to knock an asteroid off a collision course with Earth.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 and DART on NASA's first planetary defense test to intentionally crash into an asteroid.
The project targets a rock known as Dimorphos, which is 11 million kilometres away. It poses no risk to Earth. Harrison Agrusa is involved in the mission.
The DART spacecraft is about the size and mass of like a golf cart maybe, or a vending machine. So it's not super large, but it'll be traveling 15,000 miles per hour, or about 6 kilometers per second. So quite fast. But it's actually only going to change the speed of this asteroid by a very small amount because, again, the asteroid we're targeting is 60 meters in diameter, so it's huge. We won't make a huge change, but it'll be a measurable change. And our simulations show that we will make this measurable change, and it'll be a great data point to use for the future.
The French international football star Karim Benzema has been found guilty of complicity in attempted blackmail and given a 1-year suspended prison sentence and a fine. Hugh Schofield reports from Paris.
The Real Madrid striker was not in court for the verdict, nor were any of the other members of the conspiracy, nor the victim, Mathieu Valbuena. Reading the decision, the judge said that Benzema might not have known all the details of the plot, but he was aware of its purpose. The evidence focused on a meeting at the National Training Centre in which Benzema said he could help Valbuena recuperate a compromising sex video. Benzema's lawyers said they were staggered by the verdict and would appeal. The French Football Federation has said a guilty verdict would not necessarily jeopardise Benzema's position in the national side.
China has objected to an American invitation to Taiwan to take part in a virtual Summit for Democracy next month. Michael Bristow reports.
China opposes Taiwan's participation because it says the island is part of its own territory and has no right to take part in international events. Predictably, China itself has not been invited. The US often accuses Beijing of undermining democracy. Russia has also been excluded. President Biden has made the defence of democracy an important part of his foreign policy. Taiwan's invitation is no surprise. Over recent years, the self-governing island has developed into a vibrant liberal democracy and has been previously praised by President Biden's administration.
Somalia's Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble has declared a state of emergency over the country's worsening drought. Several regions are affected, with many people and animals in a desperate situation. World News from the BBC. A senior member of the Taliban in Afghanistan, Anas Haqqani, has called on all sides in the two-decade conflict to forgive each other, but insisted that the United States was the main cause of the hostilities. In a BBC interview, Anas Haqqani said that all the participants were sorry there had been casualties. He said the Haqqani network was proud of the part it played in the fight that ended what he called the occupation by US-led forces. The South Korean tech giant Samsung has announced it's chosen the US state of Texas to build its new $17 billion microchip factory. It comes amid a global supply shortage of semiconductors, which Samsung and its rivals have been racing to solve. Sweden's parliament has elected the country's first female prime minister, the Social Democrat leader Magdalena Andersson. She was previously the finance minister and replaced Stefan Löfven as head of the party after he retired earlier this month. Maddie Savage reports from Stockholm.
Despite regularly being ranked one of the world's most gender-equal countries, until now there's never been a woman prime minister here. Magdalena Andersson took over as leader of the Social Democrats last month, but to lead her country, she needed to ensure a majority of politicians in Sweden's divided parliament didn't vote against her. That only happened after an 11th-hour deal with the opposition Left Party in exchange for higher pensions for many Swedes. But Andersson's already facing a tough start in the job, with opposition parties on the right saying they'll reject the government's budget later.
A curfew has been imposed in the capital of the Solomon Islands after protesters burned buildings and looted shops. A building next to the Pacific Nations Parliament in Honiara was set alight. Police fired tear gas to disperse the demonstrators. The protesters are angry at a decision to switch diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China. BBC News.
The news came to you with the compliments of Eureka Medical Laboratories.
A COVID-19 PCR test is now mandatory for many routine activities, including travel and return to work purposes. At Eureka, our trained and experienced staff will ensure confidentiality while your test is conducted in a professional and timely manner, which results in just 48 hours. So the next time you require an efficient and hassle-free PCR COVID-19 test, call 624-8378, 608-8378, or 623-7233 to schedule your appointment. You can also ask about our house call testing service.
And now to end the news, here is a recap of the leads. The Alliance for Change is accusing the governing People's Progressive Party administration of stalling the Public Accounts Committee process of shortlisting names for the Public Procurement Commission. One parliamentary political party is calling for the restart of amending election laws and to include the Law Reform Commission and other experts. Trinidad and Tobago's Energy Minister, Stuart Young, is warning Guyana and Suriname about opportunists who would like to take advantage of the oil sector in the two countries. And in regional news, faith-based groups are challenging the government of Barbados over attempts to tamper with references to God in the coming Charter of Barbados. And that's the end of the news.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio Newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.